So,
Water. Of course you don't have water, right?
We'll introduce ourselves before we speak, just to keep things moving along here. It's 7:38. So I really appreciate everyone's time, who's both presenting some of our Charter Toolkit tonight and those who are jumping on to hear more about it. Oh, hi, Anna. You're on two levels here, it looks like. Can you hear us? We'll try you in a second. And so we'll introduce ourselves before we speak, but there's 4 of us tonight here on behalf of Great Lakes Commons. And for a little bit of background, the Great Lakes Commons Charter was a 2-year collaborative process, which eventually was launched in 2014 with a forum like this with people across the Great Lakes. And since then, we've been driving and its message around various forums. But lately, we've really, wanted to unpack this very, conceptual, sort of invitational, aspirational document as we want to put forth something that we would like for the Great Lakes versus always saying what we don't want for the Great Lakes. And so the Charter Toolkit is a product of that need of how to address these issues that are within the umbrella of the Charter, but are much more strategic, and not only in terms of the issue that they're approaching, but also the process and the ways in which we define leadership and organize leadership. And so, for those who don't know me, I'm Paul Baines. I'm on Lake Ontario somewhere, and I wanted to talk about the purpose of this call is to do a quick show and tell of a couple of those Charter Toolkit items. Jen Pate will be speaking about a plastics toolkit. Her background is her experience has also been in microplastics and sampling. And so she'll be talking briefly about this microplastics or this plastics approach. And even though there's lots of other plastics and waters resource guides out there, we feel like this one is special and that it has a Great Lakes focus, but it's also trying to look at some of the themes around consent, around precaution, around action and reflection that she has a model for as well. So we're going to hear from me as well. I've got a little section I want to present about some questions, how to have some commons conversations around bottled water. Bottled water is a pretty easy target for looking at the commons, because in some way that's the opposite of a commons. So I'll speak about that. Alexa Bradley will be speaking about as a co-founder of Milwaukee Water Commons. Alexa will be speaking about part of that story and how that Milwaukee story could translate into Welland or into Bayfield or into Cleveland or Traverse City. I almost know where everybody is on this phone call. When you introduce yourself, let us know where you're calling from tonight. So Alexa will be speaking about that experience of the Milwaukee Water Commons, which again is putting forth a vision of what a water city looks like when people are at the center of that decision making within a unified ethical framework at the same time. And Luke Evans will also be speaking about an element of the toolkit, which again we'll be sending these things out as they're ready. Some of us work in water policy probably every day, like maybe Carice. And so, but a lot of this stuff is divided by what Canada's doing, or what the United States is doing, or what Ontario is doing, or what Michigan is doing, or what the Chiefs of Ontario is doing. Luke Evans has put together a beautiful document that really tries to simplify and unpack what are the various agencies and rules and contexts for Great Lakes governance. We can't necessarily wish for greater public participation in Great Lakes decision making unless we had a little bit more knowledge, shared knowledge of what that process is. And so Luke will be speaking about that. And so that's the overall, and then the final part will be sharing some of the resources to come. But after each mini presentation from those 4 speakers I just mentioned, we'd love to hear your general feedback on, does this feel like it would be useful? And if so, how could you use this resource or these ideas in the work that you do? So we'll have a short presentation, we'll open it up, another short presentation, we'll open it up, and back and forth. How does that sound?
Sounds great. And Paul, I'll just mention that I am muting people as they sign on, so people should unmute themselves when they want to talk.
Wonderful. So I'll do a quick, very quick. So this is a Zoom platform. Most people are using their computers. Thank you. But there is, if you do use your phone, just make sure you're not anywhere noisy, which is great for Todd today. And there is a mute button in the bottom left corner of your screen. You can also turn off your video if you wanted to. And there's also a chat box, which you can use to send messages or links or whatever to a particular person or to the group as a whole. So thanks for that reminder, Luke. Maybe we'll just finish our introductions just because I like to know who's on the call. And we've done most of them already. I see Nancy. We can also make sure everyone's microphone is working for when we open it up.
Hi. I am Nancy McBride. I am from Tottenham, Ontario. What else do you want to know?
Is there a particular water issue or community organizing work that you do?
Right now, my town has extraordinarily high trihalomethane levels, brown iron water, and they use a lot of chlorine to fight all the organic matter. And as a result, for 17 years now, we were promised clean water, and we always just thought, oh, it's brown, it's okay, you know, not a big deal. Until last year, I found out that the THM levels were very high for all of these years, and as a carcinogen, it's, you know, it's terrible. So myself and another woman started a group and a website called tottenham-water.ca. And from there, we've just become more and more involved in water issues, you know, interest across Canada, the States, the world. So wanting to do our part, that's all. Thanks.
Wonderful. And we'd love, yeah, and so let's see how we can make this call useful for you as well.
Great, thank you.
I know Nadine is here as well. Do you want to just say briefly who you are, Nadine, for those who don't know?
Yes, hello, I'm Hanna De Chardin. I'm in Owen Sound. I'm a water walker. I'm a co-founder of the coalition Water is Life, Justice for Water with Becky Big Canoe. Yeah, I'm also part of Owen Sound Water Watchers, and trying to get this community to be a blue community with Liz Zetlin. Yeah, a lot of water work being done, and I raised some concerns here about the high level of chlorine that we could smell in the water, and there's been some great improvement with that. So yeah, so far I've managed to not get kicked out of City Hall. So that's been really good. And over here, people are starting to take the water work seriously, as our water pipe system and sewage system is very aging, and pipes are bursting every year. And once people on council and the mayor got affected and had no waters for 4 to 5 months last winter, they started to be a little kinder to our endeavor and so forth. So I'm grateful for all the people that are here tonight, and I'm going to mostly listen and learn. Thank you.
Wonderful. Good to see you, Nadine. And it's been a little while. We used to have our monthly Water is Life calls before. So
yeah. I got canoe paddles now, so I can canoe and I can kayak. I got my vest too, so we'll need to talk.
Okay, great.
Okay.
We're just getting a quick overview and making sure everyone's microphone is working for our discussion to come. I think we've heard from Todd and we've heard from Fiona. Lastly, we just have Anna to make sure her microphone is working for the discussion.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Anna Suknik. Home for me is Cleveland, Ohio. I was glad to meet Paul in Peterborough a few weeks ago, and he told me a bit about Great Lakes Commons work, and I was very excited. Yes, you have the badge. Yes, that's great. Cleveland is my home, and I'm trained in mediation and conflict resolution, and I just graduated from undergrad, so I'm looking for and have been engaging with the platforms and nexuses of peace and conflict resolution, and have been coming to the learning lately of the role that I think our postures have in transforming resource interrelation, whether that's our home, our earth, and each other. So that's sort of where I'm joining you all.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Jen Pate to speak about our sort of Great Lakes Plastics Action Kit. And the last bit of context is this is actually the fourth in a series of charter conversations, commons conversations we've hosted, Luke and I. The first one was a few months ago now. We hosted a bunch of a conversation with bottled water activists in Ontario and in Michigan. Very rarely were those two communities speaking to each other, even though they work under different regulatory regimes, however, with some of the same corporations and some of the same, obviously, public interest needs. And so we connected those two groups of people together for a call like this. A few weeks later, we hosted a call with 12 educators from around the Great Lakes, both classroom and community educators, talking about water pedagogies, how we teach about and with water to a larger society. And then in December, we hosted a call called Great Lake Stands with Standing Rock to hear some stories of people who had visited Standing Rock and how we could use some of that energy and learn from some of that here with the various Great Lakes issues as well. And also all three of those events and documentation are on our website. And this is also being recorded to share and document for part of our process as well. So this is the fourth of those conversations for the Charter Toolkit. So Jen, tell us about this water human bodies thing.
Right, okay, so I'm going to start by introducing myself. Hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining the call tonight. I got involved with the Great Lakes Commons about, I guess, a year and a half ago when I first got in touch with Paul about a project that I was organizing this past summer. So on the 20th of August, 2016, I hosted a mass engagement event across the Great Lakes. It was the world's largest simultaneous sampling for microplastics in history. And it was about basically engaging people across the entire region with this very pervasive issue, but also really trying to encourage people to understand that we are not separate from the Great Lakes, that environmental and human health is intrinsically linked, and what we put out, we get back. And it was really quite heartening to see so many people get involved. And really, for me, one part of it was obviously taking the samples, creating a citizen science data set. But the best part for me was the creation of a community and the raising awareness of one another and sort of seeing each other. Social media played a very large role in terms of making us aware of all of these amazing people across this incredible region we call home. So this toolkit basically comes out of a body of work that I've been doing for quite a long time. I've been working on environmental issues for the past decade internationally. So I've led and been a part of several international sailing expeditions that have researched plastic and toxic pollution, not only in the Great Lakes, but also in the oceans and also the Caribbean Sea. And what I've seen through that research and those experiences is that really all the solutions start on land, and it really comes down to the individual to make conscious choices about what they expose themselves to, and also how they act in the face of quite overwhelming global problems. So I've done some work on the policy side and the industry side, but really where I believe change begins is with us as individuals, but also as homegrown communities, whether that's across an entire region or it's your village or your town. So this toolkit really rises from my work on human environment interaction and understanding that water and human bodies are connected. And so when Paul and I started to discuss putting a toolkit together, what we really wanted to do with this, there's a lot of toolkits, as Paul mentioned earlier in the call. There are toolkits out there about the plastic issue, about toxic issues, but there really isn't one that's kind of weaving all of these things together and really trying to break down the separation of external and internal environment, and really trying to get people to understand that everything is one. So what we try to do with this toolkit is utilize the plastic and toxic issue as a great illustration of that interconnectedness. So for those of you who maybe haven't had exposure to the plastics and toxics issue, basically what we're dealing with is the fact that we have extremely high amounts of plastic being released out into our waterways, and these act as sponges for toxics and chemicals that have been released as well, and that these are making their way back to us through the food chain. So it's kind of that perfect feedback loop about what you put out, you get back. And, it brings, several of you have talked about issues of toxics and chemicals in your local waterway, in your drinking water. And, that's what we're trying to sort of raise awareness of, is that plastic is not just plastic. It actually acts as a vehicle for these toxics and chemicals as well. So we're really bringing in that health issue. So when we decided to bring this toolkit together, what came very naturally was the concept of bodies, understanding that there's the water bodies that we interact with, but there's also the water and our own bodies. And that's basically where we're seeing these issues come back to. And when we start to talk to people who maybe have had very little exposure or have never really opened themselves up to talking or engaging with environmental issues, using the human body is something that they can relate to straight away because they have one. And so when we started to sort of break this down and sort of trying to get people to sort of engage with this issue, not making it too big, too overwhelming, or too scary, was breaking it down using the human body. So Paul's going to bring up in a minute this sort of illustration that we've used, which is basically a diagram of the human body. And what we've done is we've basically broken it down into sort of 6 sections. Paul, have you got that image there?
Yep. 1 second.
Perfect. Right. There we go. So we've broken it down into different ways of engaging and sort of working our way through this interconnectedness of human and environment, but also the different sort of roles that can be played by thinking about the body in this way. So the first is starting with the head, really focusing on mindset. We've actually changed awareness and knowledge to awareness and understanding, and then moving our way down to the heart, emotional connection to environment, emotional connection to the world around us, but also to ourselves. And then moving on to the hands, where basically it operates as the center for action. And as we start to work our way through the toolkit, we talk about mindset and head first, heart and emotion, and how those two play, they're completely interconnected in the way that they operate, and that leads to action. And then we move to organs, basically looking at sort of the fact that with plastics and toxics, the impacts that we're seeing on human health are seen in the organs. We focus a lot on the fact that, as human beings, we have over 700 foreign synthetic chemicals in our bodies. And as we start to sort of explore issues of body burden, really seeing the impacts of these on human health, specifically reproductive health, when we're looking at endocrine disrupting chemicals, and basically trying to get people to understand that this is not something that's just going to affect them, but it affects the next generation. Really, when we start to look at the toxics and chemicals that are present in our bodies, there is only one way to expel those toxics and chemicals, and that's in the process of childbirth. So this is another sort of conversation that we really want to raise with people, is that this is about female health. A lot of the work that I've done has really focused on working with women and making and really raising awareness of, making conscious consumer decisions, but also understanding that this is about the future generations and women as water keepers. And then we work down again to the legs, journeys. This is kind of inspired a lot by the work of the GLC this past summer on their journeys project. My event on the 20th was one of these journeys, and really understanding that journeys don't have to only be physical, they can be emotional, and that they can be, a version of you basically exploring, even taking part in this toolkit, maybe working your way through these as a journey. So really seeing that as an opportunity to kind of explore your relationship with the environment and with yourself. And then the last being the feet with grounding, really understanding that we need to be thinking of everything in a holistic sense, you really approaching things with a land to lake approach, but also with the lake to land and the lake to us. So this is basically a toolkit that will hopefully provide people with a little bit of a framework for exploring complicated issues, really trying to break it down. And as I said, using plastics and toxics as a very real illustration of human environment interaction and the interconnectedness of human and environmental health. So I'm hoping that we can, give you guys a chance to have a look through this in more depth after this call as well. But it would be really great to get your thoughts about this structure. Paul and I have been sort of working it back and forth and really trying to sort of condense it into something that we think would be useful. And I mean, as I hope we'll kind of see with a lot of these bits of the toolkit, it's about creating frameworks and case studies so that you could apply this to other issues if there was something else that you really felt passionate about. Using this framework, the idea of ourselves as human beings, but as that interconnection between human and environmental health or human environment relationships, that you would be able to use this to explore any issues here in the Great Lakes, but also internationally or global water bodies as well. And Paul, please feel free to jump in if you feel like I've not covered anything in particular.
No, we will be sending this out to everybody. We have a few more changes to make. Looking at some of the brief introductions we've done, one of the focuses of this toolkit of this particular aspect of plastics is this real connection between the water cycle and the life cycle. And when we're looking at other pollutants in the environment, I think as we're all concerned about water, water is a great lens and issue to focus on to really look at what we were raised to think of what is the environment, and that we're not just environmentalists, we are part of Mother Earth protecting herself. And so part of this toolkit element is a combination of particular questions and looking at a particular issue like plastics, but it's also a demonstration of how we can dive deeper into making water issues, public health issues, reproductive justice issues, gender issues, rights of future generation issues, life cycle analysis of the plastics industry from source to for thousands of years afterwards. So these themes could be applied in other issues as well. But I'd like to open it up before we move on for what are some just general reactions, or what would be some questions you would have around this water cycle, life cycle, water, humans, bodies thing. How do you think you could use it in your work? Or do you know of a particular organization or event that would be interested in this that we could contact, or you could help us contact? It's open.
Do we raise a hand? How do we participate?
Well, for those on the computer, they can use the chat box, but we're not a huge group. For those calling in, there's 11 of us. But just unmute yourself and or wave your hand and then go, I guess. All right, Alexa, you're up.
That is just so exciting to hear about this toolkit, Jen and Paul. I love the way you designed that, and it feels like it would be so useful as a starting point, just to think about the body of water and our bodies and their connections, and to use that as a way of reflecting on the health of both. And it looks fantastic. I'm really looking forward to looking at it. Just feels, it's beautifully designed, and I love the way you imagined it. It feels so accessible and useful.
Great.
Can I speak?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
This is very exciting for me. We, always trying to relate to people to get them interested and drawn in. And that has been a challenge where I am. People are so busy on the hamster wheel, I call it, that nobody wants to take a stop and take a good look at what's actually happening. And relating this to the human body, is a wonderful start off point, just to be able to share this with people. Ideas are popping out of my head right now, between having it available to schools, elementary or high schools. I know that there's some action going on about, I'm not sure what they're calling themselves, but trying to put together water action in Toronto for September. There's
Greatness Project.
What's that? Sorry?
Greatness Project.
Is that what it's called?
They're leading it. There's a couple include Eco Logos is involved. Waterlution is involved.
Yes.
Josephine's involved. Yes.
Right. So of interest, I'm sure they would be of interest with this. It's, I can't wait to go through it. So that's my input.
Wonderful. Great. Any other general feedback or a particular way you see this could be used by yourself or somebody you know?
Like Nancy, this is Fiona. Like Nancy, I've got so many ideas coming to my mind. I think it's very beautiful. Thank you so much. It's really very beautiful and very imaginative. My first thought was that I would like to share it with my friends in the local Indigenous community, and see if there was some way, that we could work together or develop a workshop together. And also they're involved, two of them have created a Indigenous solidarity at Brock that puts on films and workshops and so on. So that's what's coming to my mind. The other thing is that Brock has an environmental sustainability research center. They're currently doing a whole series of science cafes on water. So I think I'd like to talk to the person who's organizing that. And just seeing if there's some kind of way of linking up. I mean, I also know some of the artistic community here. And one of our best known artists, Elizabeth Chitty, has been working on water and water in the history of Niagara and the Great Lakes and so on for several years. She does multimedia stuff. I want to share that with her. So as you can see, I'm just really spinning off this.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Really. Wonderful. There's two particular resources on that first note, Fiona, around Indigenous communities. I was lucky enough to find and be through Facebook and others, two great resources. One is both listed at the back of the resource here. The first one is the violence on the land, violence on our bodies, the initiative report and toolkit. This I learned a lot from around some of these themes around reproductive justice, and some of the petrochemical implications in plastics industry around that, and redefining what the environment and what the body is. Again, the womb being the first environment. And a great video called Our Bodies and Our Lands Are Not Your Property by Erica Violet Lee. And so we've got a couple of extra resources in this as well that speak to some of those issues.
Brilliant. Okay.
And York University has an environmental justice symposium, and I think Vanessa Gray, who part of this Violence on the Land group from Amjuang, will be speaking as well. So I'll get in touch with her for that as well, so we can make some links.
This might not be the right time, but I'm just going to throw it out there. There's a couple of mentioned about blue communities. I didn't didn't mention where I live. I live in Bayfield, Ontario, right on Lake Huron. I was an integral part of becoming a blue community here in Bayfield. So for those of you who are working on that, I'm happy to talk to you about our experiences here. I also presented in Goderich about a month ago, and they have agreed to become a blue community as well.
Great.
You know, it's happening. The blue is spreading. So if any of you are curious about it, or you're in the midst of it, you're finding it frustrating, if you want to have a chat, then please don't hesitate to contact me.
Okay, wonderful. I see some thumbs up there. And so I think we'll hit the last part of the call for just more general discussion and follow up. I just wanted to highlight that, as I mentioned, each part of this toolkit is trying to emphasize and celebrate an aspect of the Commons Charter. And in this particular piece, I pulled out the following quote from the Great Lakes Commons Charter. It says this: "Moved by a hope that we can yet create a thriving and life-sustaining future for our lakes, we step forward to take up our responsibility to care for and act on behalf of these waters, our Great Lakes Commons. Seeing that the health of our waters is intertwined with that of our own health and that of generations to come, we are called to assert a deeper connection and more powerful role in the future of our waters." And we link towards the Charter as well. So this particular, you know, everything connects to everything else, but I wanted to highlight that aspect maybe to close on before I move on to the next piece. All right. So I'll go next before we come to Alexa, and then maybe we'll close with Luke talking about a very sort of overview of how are the Great Lakes governed anyways. It seems to be this massive entanglement that Luke's done a great job of clarifying for us. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So like I mentioned before, several weeks ago, we hosted this conversation between bottled water activists in Michigan and Ontario. And for many years, I've been interested in this topic of bottled water, and I'm sure many of you are as well. My background is a combination of environmental studies and cultural studies, and Fiona and I had some great conversations about all this stuff. She's also a humanities person herself. And so thinking about how we think about water has always been part of my work with Great Lakes Commons. And I find myself both encouraged but also frustrated with some of the bottled water activism that is going on. And Great Lakes Commons is also in that space in which we want to support, you know, on the ground activists organizing who are fighting issues that are affecting them directly and are happening right now, and in a little more long-term and cultural shifts as well, which we feel that we need to sort of, again, put forth what we want rather than just fighting against what we don't want. And so part of the Charter Toolkit has this bundle of resources around community organizing. Alexa will speak briefly about the Milwaukee experience. But one of those other pieces to that bundle is this practical guide for a great transition. And this is a great resource I found about reimagining activism. And we all may have a definition in our mind of what activism is or who's an activist. And we may all be involved with different kinds of activism. What I found encouraging about Great Lakes Commons, partially, and also what this reimagining activism is about, it's really trying to think about how do we both deal with the issues on our table right now that are pressing, and the language and discourse and the sort of mechanics, and how do we equally and also work on the larger narratives, values, seeds that we want to plant, so that we're not going to be stuck in this mess forever. And so this resource guide is a great one that I wanted to highlight, which are basically the sort of context for what I decided to do around this bottled water issue. You know, one of the diagrams in this resource kit is looking at the various roles. I think in activism, I've been around it for a long time, I don't find there's enough discussion around what do we each bring to the table. You know, everyone's trying to be this sort of one-size-fits-all activist, and the level of burnout or lack of specialization can be also not very effective. And so, you know, one way of looking at that is looking at these various roles of, you know, the acupuncturist. So this person uses windows of opportunity to target and leverage points that can shift the system. And so, Todd, I'd love to hear your opinions about some of this stuff. We also have the gardener. This person helps the new system emerge by naming, connecting, nurturing, and illuminating the pioneers of the new system. many of you may have seen those Bioneers videos, or be a part of other organizations that are so these emerging. We feel that Great Lakes Commons is one of those pioneering a new system. We also have the broker. This person creates meaningful connections and learning cycles around the questions, around the question of system change and between movements and networks at multiple geographical locations. So here we have, we need those types of skills and those types of strategies in our work. But lastly, and the one I wanted to focus on, was we need a role and an activist strategy that is also embracing the questioner for our movement. The questioner supports deliberation on fundamental questions and helps create new discourse for a cultural shift. So what does that look like? Well, I ended up writing about a bunch of critical questions around bottled water to be part of this sort of like reimagining activism practice. And these would be a series of also Facebook posts with some background text and ideas of how to move this conversation along. And so I was thinking not just about the questions themselves, but also the format and the strategy of how these questions could be shared and used as part of an action toolkit. So we'll also amalgamate them all into a resource guide and be able to print off, but this could be used for classrooms or presentations. So I'll just jump right into it, whatever. Everyone can see this? So these are sort of, again, Facebook-friendly sort of graphics, and I'll read it aloud as well. So this one has an outline of an empty bottle of water, and it says bottled water, starting a commons conversation. And there's just one question on each of these. I've got about 10 of them. I'll see how many I can get through. But the first question asks, if water permits us all to be here, right? Every town and community is only there because of the water source, why are we not asking the water's permission for our use and treatment of this gift? And this question is trying to, again, start to sort of reposition who owns the water and what kinds of regimes and ethics do we have when we start to think about withdrawals for bottled water, right? And so this would be posted on Facebook with a bunch of other sort of information around the ways in which the water permitting system works and how that is a part of an ethical framework that's not working very well on many levels. And we would invite discussion and answers to this question at the same time. There's another one. Same graphic, just different colors and all the rest of it. So here we go. Since Canada and the USA are treaty nations, why are they not, with their related states, provinces, and municipalities, making all water governance decisions with their Great Lakes Treaty partners? In Great Lakes context, this would be the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee nations. This has come up several times with the bottled water issues near the Guelph area, which is within this Haudenosaunee territory promised to them after the War of 1812 because they were kicked out of their traditional territories from Upper New York. And so here we have 2017 in which we are still haven't figured out how to respect the treaties and have a nation-to-nation dialogue. And I really feel that water in general and water can be a great peacemaker and part of this treaty making and renewal process. And so this is what this question is about. I'll read a couple more. This question asks, since the Great Lakes are an interconnected watershed, why do we have different and uncoordinated processes for water withdrawal permits? So as you're all aware, there's various jurisdictions, and these may seem all normal and conventional. However, after some preliminary research that I did for a mapping project, we could see that there are hundreds of permits across the Great Lakes for water, thousands for water withdrawals. There's about 100 of them for bottled water in particular. So here we are in Ontario making decisions about to withdraw water. And some of you may know Ontario borders on Lake Superior, on Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and on Lake Ontario. And yet other states, other American states on the other side of that international border are also making decisions around who gets water and for what purposes. And there is no standard. There is no dialogue. There is no common process for thinking about how much is too much, or for what use is the most important. What is the sort of 5-year permit, 10-year permit? Are we going to monitor 2% of these wells? Are we going to monitor 50% of these wells? How are this reporting going to be shared? There is no coordinated process for either the public or for the industry itself. And Ontario is redoing its rules. However, there's been no discussion of how Ontario's new rules for bottled water is going to relate to or speak to the rules, let's say, in Michigan, for instance, which also borders on several Great Lakes. I'll just read maybe two more here. I've got more than I need, but again, these are about starting conversations around commons using bottled water as an example. So here we get back into the values question, asking, how is it ethical or even efficient to pollute water making plastic water bottles, spending money on marketing and then filtering bottled water, and then polluting this water again by putting it in a plastic bottle that leaches hormone-disrupting toxins? Now, again, this may seem common sense and obvious to those on the call, but the point of these questions is to also push the agenda and push the expectation of how is this product we've gotten used to called bottled water, how is this efficient? How is this ethical? What is this actually sort of doing to the water cycle? And it's not just about marketing a product. It's also about what kinds of social license are we giving over. Yeah, so I've got several more. I don't want to. So these are all designed to provoke discussion around various elements, the ways in which the process works right now. I mean, I had a phone call with someone today, and this question came up on the fly. So if bottled water is the best option for rural and indigenous communities without access to clean drinking water, shouldn't we also be asking how their historic water sources are now polluted? So here we have communities hundreds of miles away from cities, and yet their streams, their groundwaters are polluted. So they need very expensive water treatment plants to access tap water rather than buying their water. And the question of, well, why is their groundwater and their local streams polluted in the first place? What type of historical legacy or pollution or mega project or pipeline or whatever sacrifice zone has created this water pollution? Because there used to be a time not so long ago which the water that was available was clean enough to actually drink, and yet we've forgotten that part of our relationship to water, that the only way we think we can drink water is by spending millions of dollars on treatment. So I have one last one I think I wanted to end up. And that was a conversation I've had with a couple of people that we could continue another time. And that is, what is the difference between water as a public good and water as a commons? And again, this would be accompanied by a bunch of text talking about public utilities, public services, and then as opposed to commons and the ways in which people are involved with those things. People in Ontario may not be aware right now. We have a big hydro debate going on about the price of hydro, and here we have a public utility, but it's only public in the ownership sense. It's not public in the sense that people actually are part of the decision-making process of how the power system and the sources of power are generated. And so there's a difference between ownership, in this case, and the actual process in which decisions are made. And this is what this public commons question is trying to get at. So I'll stop there for now, and I wanted to both present those ideas of the role of the questioner in sort of transformational social change, and also using bottled water and questions around that in a social media strategy sense to sort of talk about Great Lakes Commons in a very particular sort of way. So I'd love to hear any feedback or comments or criticisms or ways in which we can get this out in the world further before we can hear from Alexa.
There are a couple of comments in the chat box, Paul, if you want to answer those. Oh,
yes. Who conceived the roles? This is really great. So this is from a document, Todd, that I can email. It's from, what do they call it? It's from this Great Transition organization. They have this like 30-page guide, and they have a whole page describing each of those roles even further. So I'm also seeing it would be cool if we could invite people to submit their own questions. I thought of that, Alexa, and I thought we could even provide a bit of a template or whatever, but I think we could not necessarily assume that my list would be, or this Commons list would be exhaustive, that this would be a part of the commenting process, and that there is an open-endedness to rewrite the questions or to invite more questions. I totally agree. Yeah. I see a waving hand, yeah. Alexa.
One of the things that strikes me that some of the questions are very accessible for someone who doesn't have any information about it, and some would require more background. Mm-hmm. So you might even have like a beginner set that are just like I think there was some that were just super simple, and then some would require maybe a little historical background or scientific, or so you could have kind of different levels, and maybe we could invite, card questions for like, what's a question, like the absolute first starting question to ask, and then what's something when you get more deep into different questions.
Yeah, wonderful. I do have text on Facebook, so I would post the image, and then I would have like sort of 20, 30 words of background, which may not be beginner, but it is good to think about the audience and ways in which to release these in a strategic sort of way. So yeah, background is important. Yeah, Jen, please.
Sorry to unmute myself. It might also be good to really open up some of the solutions-based questions. So instead of only focusing on the problem, also try and sort of open people up to, okay, what can we actually do about it? What can you as individuals, industry, policy, just, I always like to do solutions-based thinking because kind of closes the loop a little bit. But it's great, Paul. I love it.
Okay, thanks. I'm taking notes. Great. Well, we can open it back up later as well, but I'd like to, maybe it's good to sort of keep the energy going forward with all this new ideas around water cycles and around commons conversations. As I mentioned, the Reimagining Activism guide is going to be part of a set of community organizing tools, including the Blue Communities Initiative that has a guide for water activists in Canada and also water activists in the USA. And so there'll be a bundle of resources in that part of the Charter Toolkit. And Alexa's now going to speak more about her involvement in founding of the Milwaukee Water Commons, which we hope could be a model for water commons communities across the Great Lakes.
Okay, is my mic on? It is, okay. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here with you. I wanted to start actually with the charter itself, which I have in this little beautiful edition from Paul. And one of the points in the charter that I was involved in some of the early drafting of it, and we said that the Great Lakes are a gift and a responsibility held in common by the peoples and communities of the lakes, and must be treated as such to ensure their preservation for coming generations. And I lived in Milwaukee, I don't currently, but I lived there for quite a while, and was living there when I was working on this, and I was thinking like, well, okay, how do you, when a community has stopped acting like a commons and stopped caring? I mean, I heard a couple people talk about that, like, things are tough in my community, and maybe some of you have been to Milwaukee. It's a city of about 800,000 people. It's historically a very industrial city, and of course a lot of that industry has left, but it's also left a legacy of a lot of pollution, aging infrastructure, a lot of also social challenges, of unemployment and poverty and segregation, racism. So, look out, it doesn't really look like your ideal commons. So the starting point was not like an easy one. But I thought, I thought about that, saying that one of the people that got early involved in this, Ben Yahola, who is a Native man that lives in Milwaukee. He's actually not from Milwaukee originally, but he said, if you take care of the water will take care of you. And I thought that's the starting point that we have to start with in this work. And so, we began from the idea of the commons, but being very far from the commons. And so we had this idea that we didn't want to become like just another environmental group. We wanted to do something different, like a different pattern, that we thought that at the core of the commons are two things. There's the water and there's the community. and their relationship to each other was very broken. And actually their relationship within the community was broken. And so our starting point was, okay, what can the water teach us that can help us heal? And so we actually began, there's a small group of us that I knew that were interested. Some people were, self-identified environmentalists, there were some artists involved, there were some urban food growers, scientists, who just all thought, let's try something different here. And we started with what we called a community inquiry. And we didn't really know exactly what we wanted to do, but at the time in Milwaukee, there was kind of a downtown business idea of Milwaukee sort of branded as this water city, but it really had no substance to it as a vision that was going to really care for the water or the community really differently. So we wanted to test different ideas and beliefs about the water. And so we created this inquiry, and I'm going to share some of these documents in a tool, like a story with some accompanying tools. So we created our own little questionnaire, and we thought, let's get way outside of the normal, usual spot. We didn't want to just talk to people that already were environmentalists or water people, but we wanted to talk to all kinds of people. So we created a list of people that were doing really different kinds of things in the city, growing food, teachers, artists, scientists, engineers, some people in law, and also from different cultural and ethnic and racial communities in the city. Because we really thought we can't just start with the same old, we have to start somewhere different. So we did this inquiry, one-on-one conversations, and we made what I think was one of the most important decisions was we start with a personal question. Instead of just your professional relationship to water, we're like, what's your personal connection to water? And people told these incredible stories, about swimming and fishing and water as solace, water as health, water as part of their family memories, water as place, water as history, water as identity. It was just so rich, and then we just asked them, some about their other connections to water. And then we had a bunch of ideas we wanted to test. Some people think that, this way about water. How do you think about it? And so we really tried to get them to talk some about their beliefs. And what that process did was it did two things. One is it taught us that people were really connected to water and it mattered to them, but they also didn't really know what to do about that. It was a really deep feeling that they had about it, and people from across all walks of life and experience had that connection. They didn't know what to do with it. And that they had these really interesting beliefs about water, that it was precious, that it shouldn't be owned, that it was, something they wanted to make sure that in perpetuity was there for other people. And so we built this, out of that, we built a community of people that were connected now, that were interested in being part of something. And we created out of that a document that we had a mission and a set of principles. And and they're on the Milwaukee Water Commons website. You can look at them. But they're deep statements about belief, that water, maybe Paul's, are you going to bring them up, Paul? You look like you might. Here, I can't. Maybe I should, well, no, I can bring them up later. You can look at them. But they're deep belief statements about how we viewed water and its importance. And from that, we built an organization. Now, 5 years later, it's a really vibrant organization. There's all kinds of people involved. We have a water school. We have an annual waterfront event called We Are Water. We have a process that's ongoing called Water City 3.0. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of those, because sometimes what I've been thinking is, like, now 5 years later, it all seems so obvious. Like, of course these all came to be, but we didn't know what we were doing and inventing. We were just one step in front of the other. And I want to say a word about each of those things. So Water School started because we realized that there were a lot of community people, particularly outside the normal environmental community, the usual anointed environmental community, that were doing really cool projects around water, that there's our website, but that they didn't get acknowledged as water leaders or having something to say or offer about water. They were doing water recapturing in their community gardens or at their school or their, place of worship. They were, they were doing interesting things around water. We wanted to find a way to lift up that watershed leadership and involvement, and we wanted to find a way to really connect more people in the community to water. So Water School was a fun way to do it. We created partnerships with 5 to 6 organizations at a time. We had involved them in a community project. We brought in artists to do fun things. You can see in some of the pictures here, we always do an art project that's, around in this case, they're fishing water bottles out of the water and turning them into something beautiful that educates about water. They all do a project, like some of them have done aquaponics projects, some of them have done rainwater capture for their gardens. In one case, they're actually doing a big cistern to capture water for a bigger garden. And we've been involving them then and getting to know each other cross community, but also so that they're also involved in the citywide conversation about water. So that, we're building a bridge between the people downtown that think they're going to shape the vision for our water city and everybody else in the city that has a lot of great ideas but was not part of that conversation. And one of the ideas, we sort of stole this from the climate march. We say everyone everywhere, that you can't create a commons or you can't create a water future with a couple people downtown or even a couple great environmental groups, that it really has to be everyone everywhere. If you're a teacher, what's your part in creating the water future and the water commons? If you're an engineer, if you're a parent, if you're a artist, if you're, anybody has a role to play. If you're have a church or some kind of spiritual community, that each of those has a connection to water. So we started building Water School with that idea of engaging community groups. We always included arts because we felt like a lot of the times you hear how bad things are with the water, but we also wanted to celebrate our love of the water. And so we do a lot of art things. We have an annual event, and any of you who want to come, it's an open event in early August every year. We do it at the waterfront. It's always very multicultural. Last year we had, Paul's been to a few of these. We usually have drumming and singing. We have spoken word. We had a rap from a young person last year. We have poetry, sometimes dance. And then there's always a conclusion is there's a group in Milwaukee called the Overpass Light Brigade, and they do these illuminated letters. And so last year they spelled out the names of the rivers and water bodies in Milwaukee in the Ojibwe, the language there that it was that many of the names actually come from, like Kinnick, Milwaukee. And so we learned the names in Ojibwe from a native speaker there. And then we also have an illuminated, where we do something illuminated on the beach. We did one year a map of the Great Lakes with illuminated candles, which is kind of a ritual, but it also is a very beautiful art installation. And just very moving to feel like it's like a dedication, expressing our dedication and love of the water. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is we have this project Water City, which is an ongoing process of inviting the community to be the ones that imagine the water future of the city. And we started out the project with this idea like, well, what if Milwaukee really could be a water city? It seemed crazy, this industrial city, like how could we become a water city? So we had this idea, well, what if we could? And we've moved from what if to as if, like we're going to act as if that's true and as if we are the ones that should be leading that. We, just the regular community people, we're not going to wait for downtown to decide it's something they're going to do. We're going to create it. And so we've done multiple convenings where we bring together all kinds of people, sometimes 100. We've had as many as, I think, maybe 250 come together of an evening. We do visioning around what the city could look like. Over time, we've identified a set of initiative areas. We took those back out to the community. We wanted to make sure we were on track. And so one of our more creative people created a water cycle, which was like this bicycle, but it was also a voting booth. And we took it down to the beaches. We took it to parks. And we asked people, like, what are the most important water issues to you? And people voted into the voting box of the important issues. And again, it was a way to do education about water, but at the same time, get the community thinking about what could be different. And out of that process, we came up with 6 initiative areas where we are now working on, and we have teams that are working on that, and we have open meetings for the community periodically to be part of that. And I think the downtown people at first thought that was kind of cute. And then, then they thought, well, these guys are kind of doing something interesting. And then this last summer, it broke out, the news broke, or we actually were called sort of by a whistleblower that let us know that there was high levels of lead in the Milwaukee water and that was being a suppressed story. And we became one of the leading organizations to break that story and now are pushing an initiative that will, address that over time. And so now I think downtown is taking us seriously as, okay, this is a community organization that actually can mobilize people across all kinds of lines in the city, that has a vision that is not just one issue, but we want our whole city to be caring for water. And you can see on our website, there's lots of different documents to look at. And and you know, may prompt ideas for you. I guess the last thing I want to say is in this process, it's been a wending process. It's not like we knew from the beginning what it would look like. And there's the water cycle. We created something we called the Community Water Assembly. And that was an idea where we wanted a body of people that are working on different initiatives to meet regularly and talk about what they're working on so we could stay together. Because some people are working on water quality, other people are working on like access to recreational access, other people are working on green infrastructure and making sure that we're really capturing rainwater and not letting it run off. So there's these different things, and we thought they could get very disconnected. So we created Community Water Assembly, again, just us, like just a group of community people who are, you know, creating this body. And we created 2 extra seats on it. We created not just people that are working on the initiatives, but one person that is going to speak for the voice of the water, and one that will speak for voice of future generations. Because we feel like it's important to always have those perspectives whenever we're talking about the future of the water. So, Paul, do you think it'd be okay if I just played like 2 minutes of the video just so people could get a little visual of Milwaukee, or do we have time for that? I can't hear you. You're muted.
We have 22 minutes total.
Oh, okay. So maybe not. But if you go onto our website, you can take a look at it yourself. There's a video that gives you, it's like a 5-minute video about Milwaukee Water Commons. You can see. And I guess the main thing I want you to know is that we're probably one of the last places that you would have thought there would be a water movement emerging. And yet what we have found is so many people in so many corners of whether they love the water because they love to fish in it or swim in it or just look at it or drink it or care about their health or care about their kids, have gotten involved. And artists, so many artists have wanted to do projects related to it. So it's been a very hopeful experience. And I'm happy to share any more about it. There's obviously lots of different things to say, but that gives you maybe a little bit of a feeling of it.
Wonderful.
So I'll take any questions or comments.
A lot to condense there. So yeah, I would encourage people to go to the website, and then we use Alexa's thing as a jumping off point. But I would love to spend time hearing comments, questions, not only in terms of finding out more that interests you about Milwaukee, but potentially how you could bridge that work to where you are, be it in Toronto or Welland or Owen Sound or Michigan or whatever. So we have some time now for feedback and bridging. Yeah, Nancy.
Well, you know, this is just, all of it is just so exciting for me. But I can't wait to get a look at your website. The stuff that you've been doing is phenomenal, to engage, you know, everybody in the activities. Like even the idea of using the bottles as crafts for kids is just wonderful. It's I like the positive aspect of it. I like that you're making it just is a positive thing rather than challenging. And these are the faults with it and stuff. You're just it would appear to me, just from what I've seen briefly, that you're just going in that this is, as you said, this is just, it's going to happen. And this is, we're going to make it happen. This is how we do it. And by doing that, you know, obviously you've had a lot of success, you know, from just people in general. So I'm very excited to see what you guys have been doing. And hopefully I can take ideas from there to try and engage people in my area a little bit more. So yeah, it's very exciting. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thanks.
I just wanted to add, like, thinking about some of the issues we heard about at the opening, you know, a lot of times the organizing invite is because there's a pressing issue, you know, this water is dirty, or and I think what I hear from the Alexa's and Milwaukee's Water Commons experience is those issues are there, but it's really about the process in which we invite leadership and showcase that leadership and put together a plan so many times I wonder, what would they do differently? I'm a big critic, as you could probably tell, and so it's always refreshing it's always probably more successful to organize equally from a position of this is what we would like to do versus this is what we don't want. And I feel like the approach of not just the arts and the environment and the food and the various sort of issues and the faith communities, there's so much teacher of leaning forward and leaning into a new vision like that. So I would encourage people in their own community what that could look like and how the sort of patterns and histories which Alexa will be sharing in more written form could really be again that balance of this is our issue right now, but how can we invite participation? Because as I've witnessed, there's usually 2 or 3 people who have time or a passion to do all of this work on behalf of people, but it's hard to sustain that over decades of change and to get some of those seeds planted that hopefully the next generation and other sort of mainstream and alternative institutions can also integrate into their everyday practice. I jumped in too soon there. Any more ideas around this community organizing aspect, this approach that Milwaukee has taken? Questions for Alexa around her role as a founder of Milwaukee Water Commons and as a person who has had to listen and lead back and forth?
Well, this is such an extraordinary enterprise and such an extraordinary model, and I just feel like that we're so far behind. It's also that I didn't realize that Milwaukee was such a large city, and that that makes quite a difference, I think, to some of us living in much smaller places. I'm thinking now about, I would just like to share this whole webinar, this whole Zoom thing, with quite a lot of people I know here, because I just think it's going to be very inspiring. It is to me. I want to say, oh my God, I know these wonderful women in London, for instance, with the Council of Canadians chapter there. I don't know if you got to meet any of them, Roberta and Julie in particular, but they're artists, and whenever they do World Water Day or anything like this, they're incredibly creative, and I think all they need is just maybe one little more push, because London is quite well organized in many ways, and that just being able to do a jumping off from some of the things that they normally do to think about the whole commons idea. Because this is basically what you're doing. I really understand. I really see that. And another city that I think would be really ready and excited for this is Hamilton. Mm-hmm. My whole area where I am, it's the commoning piece that's so hard to get people to embrace. Because this is really very traditional where I am. People are so used to, well, there's the leader up there and they're going to stay the leader and they're going to tell you what to do. Yeah. And it's not even sometimes so hard. The problem sometimes isn't shifting the leader out of the way. It's trying to get other people to see that we're all leaders,
we have that same problem in Milwaukee because it's, that's so ingrained in all of us. And I think that's why we started. We didn't want to scare people off and say, we're going to go down to City Hall and we just start with the conversations. And I think most people will give you a conversation. We met just at a coffee shop and we just said, there's a lot going on with water in the world. It's, and we live here on water. And so we want to just start with a conversation like your thoughts about water and, what you think is important about it, concerns you have, but to start with the personal. Yeah. And so it doesn't feel like you're asking someone to suddenly become an activist if they haven't, or even like a water, protector if they haven't identified, but just to explore them and uncover where that might be the case. And also we invited them, I think the last 2 questions were, because there'd been this conversation like, oh, Milwaukee's a water city. We're like, well, what would that mean to you? Like if Milwaukee really was a water city or was going to be one, what would that mean for you? And why would it matter to you? And so we started the idea of them being visioners of the city. And it's like almost like a little behind, it's sort of, kind of like a sneaking in a little bit of inviting someone to see themselves as a leader. When people say, well, for me, it would be like, when my kids could swim and that everyone could access to the water. And, we'd have jobs that related to clean water. Like someone said, oh, great. And so we used all that as a jumping off point then at some point to bring people together. We did the community inquiry. We came up with some findings of what connected us to our water, what disconnected to us, and ideas for the future. And we invited everybody that we had talked to come together and hear what each other said. And that was like the first time we got people together just to hear what each other said, and it was like, here's the connections, here's the disconnections, and here's ideas, like what resonates for you here. And it was just such a light touch. It wasn't like we're convening a town hall. We're not like carrying our pitchfork down to the city hall. It was really kind of light because we didn't know whether people would really be up for it. And we were so surprised at that light entry point as a point of access. So you have to figure out what works for you. It could be a coffee. It could be a conversation. It could be it could be an art exhibit or an art event that people come to, and then you ask some questions. You've got Paul here, the great question asker. Like we would ask that same question, like, well, there's a Native American saying that if you take care of the water, it will take care of you. What do you think about that? Start there. That's a great jumping off point. Like, well, do you agree? Don't you agree? Why not? What do you think it means? How does your life and our city line up with it? It could just be in a whole evening right there.
Yeah.
We're going to go with Jen, I think, next.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that one point. I guess one of the things that I found quite effective in terms of engaging people, and Alexa, you've definitely done it in terms of your water school, is focusing on that personal connection, but also focusing on the fun. If you want to engage people and you want to keep them engaged, it's so hardwired in us to believe that we're helpless. And so we need to shift the conversation from being helpless and powerless to helpful and powerful. And how we do that is by making people aware, empowering them, and as you've done, Alexa, giving them the sense of being in a wider community, giving them a sense of being part of something bigger. And that makes them feel powerful. And really, in terms of engaging this big group of people that we did last summer, it's the invitation for them to make it their own. All of us have different relationships to water. We all engage with it in different ways. But Alexa, I love that you started with the personal, because that's how you're going to get people to act, is making them remind themselves why they feel that connection to water. What does it mean to them? Because that's going to be their motivation for acting, not whether there might be even a massive problem facing them, but sometimes that's too scary to engage with directly and straight away. And so if you can start with those simple questions of why do you feel that connection? What does that mean to you? And then start to move towards positive action and really that sense of optimism. It's the opening of a door for them to engage with those wider, scarier issues, and any action towards basically cultivating or instilling a duty of care in someone going to help in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, that focus on fundamental connection is key for sure.
One thing I wanted to say also just quickly is one of the things I feel is important is the commons is a different pattern of life. It's where we really understand, interdependence. It's sort of an approximation of it, but just our total interconnectedness and inseparability. And so one of the things I think is really important is to go about this in ways that you wouldn't ordinarily. And so to think about who's involved really creatively right from the beginning. Like we did not want to just create like a typical environmental group. We wanted to make sure it was racially diverse, it was age diverse, it was cross sectors and cross different communities. And so whatever that means in your community, to invite some people that are outside of the usual suspects and make sure they're part of the conversation, because that becomes the seeds then that grow. And I think a lot of times we start things and then way down the pike we're like, geez, we should have involved other people, and it's harder to get people involved later. Yeah. So in that community inquiry, it's a chance to talk to some people you know, on different parts of the community where you live. And it sounds like everyone here has a lot of those kinds of those kinds of connections across community, but really think about the who right from the beginning.
Do you have information on your website about how you did this community inquiry?
I don't know how much of it's on the website right now, but I'm putting together some of those documents to share with Paul and Luke and to share them with Great Lakes Commons. It was one of those things that was it sounds so neat and tidy now, but it was kind of messy. So I'm trying to figure out like what are the key moments to really share with people that could be helpful to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll have that community inquiry form. We'll have the principles we developed. We went through a whole process of telling our story. What do we believe about the Water City? We had a group a gathering called the Convergence, where we brought people together, and we'll have some of those key moments, and some of them have kind of tools, and some of them are other like documents that might be useful to just inspire you. So I'll pull that together, and we'll have that hopefully in the next couple of weeks to be shared.
Well, that'd be great. That'd be great.
I'm mindful of time, but I also, not everybody has spoken, and I'm not sure everybody wants to speak, but I definitely would love to keep the door open for anybody who would like to sort of pick up on any of these themes. Luke and I were going to share a bit more on like things that else the toolkit bundle includes, but those again will be on the website. So if you've got a question or a comment, please don't hesitate. There is, as I mentioned, there's going to be, I'll just quickly just do this right now. So think of your question while we, or last comments, as we do a quick go around. I did want to show this off a little bit because our graphic designer, Alina, spent so much time on it lately, where we really thought about this question of governance and what's going on right now with Canada, United States, and the various tribes and First Nations. And Luke's done a phenomenal job. He's a bit under the weather. Jump in, Luke, if you want. But there's just like multiple pages here. Here's a sample of all the federal laws and actors, the various departments, ministries that some of you may be aware of. But Luke's also researched and listed the tribes within the basin. Again, this is a basin perspective on water governance. Normally, these are province or state or one colonial government or the other colonial governments. The First Nations in the basin. I will note the Great Lakes Commons map now has a layer of First Nations in the Great Lakes, which is a visual representation of all of these communities as well. So we'll be sending this around as part of the toolkit package, along with a glossary and there's a body of work we're working on talking about the dish with one spoon, the doctrine of discovery, the two-row wampum, other Indigenous principles and laws that are part of water governance of the Great Lakes for thousands of years. So we wanted to use this governance piece as an introduction to that. The Canada-Ontario Agreement, the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, the Great Lakes was a water compact, I know as well. And so we do want to thank our funders. We've got the Commission for Environmental Cooperation and the Park Foundation, our long-term partner in all this work. So, and then that's it. On our website, we'll be posting on our Commons Charter Toolkit. We would encourage, obviously, everyone to share and support the Commons Charter with their name and commitment on it as well. Maybe we're used to petitioning governments or corporations, but in this instance, we're petitioning ourselves within the visibility of a Great Lakes Commons community. And so, and lastly, we've got two other workshop outlines around body commoning, of how to use movement and theater as a way to think about power and understanding your position and ways in which to move from being a spectator to being an actor, from being passive to being an actor, and all of this. So I'll close on that, and I'd love to hear any last words for comments, especially from those who haven't said anything yet, or just final last words. Todd, Anna, Nadine, no pressure, Chorus.
Thank you, everybody. This has been, thank you, Paul. This has been very educational for me. And I like that we can download, that there's a recording of all that so that I can revisit all that because I'm going to have to do some really, really great things that I heard today. And I'm grateful for Jennifer and Alexa as well. My head's a little spaced out because as the meeting was going, I have my elders that are already in Peterborough for the Elders Water Conference. And they were desperately looking for a ride for me to join them tomorrow. And at the same time, I'm like texting on the phone and on Facebook, trying to find everybody hotels and everything. And I'm trying to, and I just couldn't grasp everything that was going on. And I felt awful for that.
Life goes on and even we're in the calls, right?
Well, it's time, like Polly mentioned, take action. And over here, like last summer when there was, I believe Jennifer was part of that, when we cleaned the shore for the plastics and all that. And I mean, I did about 10 kilometers. So 20 altogether, because I did one side of the Sindham River all the way to the opening of Georgian Bay and then come back the other side. So I did the east and west side, and I filled so much garbage. There was a city people, they were angry because I was putting the garbage bags into the city garbage bin. And I'm like, well, then, if you were doing your job, So then the mayor actually came out and I had a chat with and, understood what it was that I was doing. And that was phenomenal. And I had a friend that was on the water taking samples as well. And, as we keep doing it, even if we're alone, and even if we're one person, eventually people will start to come. And we can all do a part in our capacity. And no part is too small to say, oh, well, they'll just be mean. I'll probably just fill one garbage bag. Well, that's one garbage bag less garbage out there for the animals, for nature. So I thank you all for your initiative because it educates me and people like me who can't be everywhere and do everything, but the light bulb goes on. It's like, you know what? I can do this right here. Let's do it. And I'm grateful for the women. Lots of women tonight. I love you, Paul.
She's an honorary woman.
Nadine, it's really nice to see your face, and I remember chatting, so thank you for getting involved last summer. And this is what it was all about. It's the fact that people went out on the same day and acted. It didn't matter what they did or where they were. It was equally important. It didn't matter whether it was a sample or cleanup or even just taking 10 minutes to sit by the lakeshore and think, what can we do, or that you're more connected. And we're continuing that work through my newest initiative, Love Your Greats. And so we're going to turn the second Saturday in August every year into an annual Love Your Greats Day. So I really encourage you to get involved again next summer.
I am.
That makes sense to you. So yay, that was so wonderful. I'm like, yay, person. So,
thank you.
That's great.
And you guys should all come to Milwaukee for our We Are Water event first Sunday in August, or have your own waterfront event on the same day and tell us about it so we can know there's sister events happening out there on the waters.
Okay. Milwaukee's in Quebec, or is it in the?
No, we're in Wisconsin.
Oh yeah, Maniwaki is in Quebec. Okay, Milwaukee. Okay.
I know Todd wanted to have a word as well. We don't. There's no deadline at 9 o'clock. If you have to go, I understand, but I also don't want to cut us off. But Todd, I would love to hear your perspectives on part of tonight, or something to add, or Anna again.
Sure. First, I'll applaud the number of women too. That's great. But that's not my comment. The having been involved for a year or so now, I've been trying to understand what is it that makes this movement of the Great Lakes Commons so unique. And I think I learned more tonight. Alexa, what you shared about the element of celebration, I think that that action that comes from injustice and from anger and from the breaking of boundaries is valid, and somehow the combination of the celebration and the life that water brings, that's what really strikes me from the big picture. And then Paul and Luke and everyone else, just the work on this toolkit is really important, and I appreciate everything down to the graphics and the whimsical nature of it, to take something that is so serious and pressing and to make it actually light in terms of theme when it's heavy in subject is really great. So kudos to you.
Wonderful. Yeah, and we'd love to continue the feedback with you, Todd, around your expertise around systems, and you're a real broker, many roles, but the broker one especially. And so lots of, hopefully some more follow up with that as well.
I just wanted to say thank you real quick to everyone who shared, and share that something that stood out to me was the language that you all used. It was there's a certain language and a posture and an invitation into these conversations, I think, that are disarming in a way. Just listening, it's all it's all an invitation to join. And I appreciated, Alexa, how you mentioned you began with the personal, and all of a sudden, weaving water and community, you're on a healing journey. I really appreciated how you shared that story as well. And Paul and Jennifer, like using the symbol and the framework of the human body, that really struck me as well, because I think so often we mute our own human fragility and our beings as inextricably bound with water, with earth, with each other, with these narratives of dominance and sovereignty, I think, above the system and above our need of it, that it's easy to ignore our personal connection with it, or personal memories, or power and ability in bringing about these paradigm shifts. So I just appreciate the overall language and the posture that the trajectory of this conversation has.
Wow, that feels good. That feels nice. Just sitting at this desk all day. It's nice to hear that after that. Luke, I know you're sick, but you've been putting some long days in here. But
I guess just touching off that point, I think it's our hope that these resources fuel the conversations and start the conversations, and they're going to be for knowledge, but they're hopefully also going to be for starting conversation, each one in a different way, and hopefully each one in a valuable way. So we definitely want people to keep that in mind as they look at these resources and give us feedback on the utility, what conversations they think they address, what conversations maybe they don't address. And so we're definitely more than happy to hear your feedback in the coming weeks as we share them.
Thank you both so much for hosting.